That's okay.
So welcome everybody to the Hofstra University Museum of Art Ask the Curators program. Today it is myself, Karen Albert, the Acting Director and Chief Curator, and my co-host is Kristen Rudy, who's
Hello.
the Associate Curator Collections Manager. So we're very happy to kind of answer some questions for you and see if we can make things, I know people often have questions about the behind the scenes thing. So that's kind of what we're gearing towards today. Okay. So first of all, I don't know how familiar some of you are with Zoom. At the first part of the program, if you could mute your microphone so that we don't have any kind of feedback or background noise. So we're doing a little bit of a presentation first, and then we're going to answer some of the questions that were submitted on registration. And then we'll be happy to answer additional questions as we go along. You can use the chat feature. It's usually towards the bottom of your screen. It depends on how your computer's set up to ask questions or make comments during the program. And we'll try to make sure we answer everybody's questions. And as I said, depending on what type of device you're on, the way your screen is laid out is going to be different. So we can try to help you if you're having a problem, but it's not always what we see is not always what you see. So the main thing is if you make sure you can see the PowerPoint, because we're going to show some images and things like that, and that will help you. Okay, so without further ado, just a little background about the museum. The museum is part of an academic, university, so that's a little bit different than some other museums. We are a fine art museum. We are not a museum of Hofstra history. So one of the things, sorry, I'm covering up my thing here. So one of the things that we do is part of our mission is to have real life experiences with objects. That's one of our main goals. Of course, in this time, it's a little bit hard to do that. So, but one of the ways we do that on a daily basis is through our exhibitions. So our exhibitions we want our exhibitions to encourage dialogue and inquiry, and that make you consider an alternate point of view or another perspective on something. And so most of our exhibits tend to deal with topics or themes that often relate to current events or issues or milestone anniversaries, things like that. We plan our exhibitions generally 2 to 3 years in advance, and this allows the curator to really carefully and thoughtfully develop the exhibition and make it happen. We do a couple different types of exhibitions. We do exhibitions that are on loan from artists. We do exhibitions that are based on our permanent collection. And we also occasionally do a traveling or a packaged exhibition. A lot of our exhibitions are actually a combination of loans and permanent collection works. Sometimes we have things in our collection, but we don't have everything. So we'll add some loans in to kind of make the point, support the thesis of the exhibition. So one of the current exhibitions I'm just going to talk about briefly is Uncharted American Abstraction in the Information Age. And this is currently installed in our Emily Lowe Gallery. Of course, we can't go there right now. There is more information on each exhibition on our website, very specific to this exhibition about the pieces. And this includes some installation views and some videos, because some of the works in this show have motion and lighting and things like that. So this exhibition there are 8 contemporary artists. These works are all on loan to us. They are mainly from the artists. There's one artist who we worked with his gallery to borrow the works. These artists all deal in very different and unique ways with issues of technology in the broadest definition. So they deal with issues, there's science, math, engineering. As I said, some of them have, there are a variety of types of media, as far as there are paintings, there's sculpture, Two of the artists did site-specific installations in the gallery. A lot of the work, let's see, 6 of the works actually plug in, and they have electronic components, some of it with light, some of it with movement. Some of the movement is audience participation. You have to be there to actually experience the work. So there's a variety of different types of ways that these artists are using different technologies. And that's a very intentional curatorial decision about choosing works that are going to show you a range of ways artists use technology. And so then, Kristen, if you want to talk a little bit about Nevertheless, She Persisted.
Sure. So the other exhibition that would be on view is an exhibition that I curated entitled Nevertheless, She Persisted. And this was scheduled to be installed in our second gallery, which is located in the Axon Library on the 9th floor, the David Filderman Gallery. This was supposed to be installed in the last 2 weeks of March. So unfortunately, it is not installed. It has not been installed. It is physically waiting to be installed. And one day it will be. But this is an exhibition that, just like Karen was speaking about, Uncharted was an exhibition that was all works on loan to the museum. Nevertheless is an exhibition pulled completely from our permanent collection. So it is all works by women artists from the museum's collection. And it is in celebration or recognition of the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, or women who were considered citizens at the time, the right to vote. So I wanted to not only present works of art by women from our collection, but also works of art by women who kind of embody this, whose either story, personal story, or artwork itself sort of embodies this idea of persistence, of fighting for either a cause or sort of just recognition, whether or not that ever came in their lifetime. And also tried to look at diversity of media and artists themselves. So I have just 3 examples here: a work by Pearl Fine on the left, it's a painting, a print by Audrey Flack in the center, and a photograph by Imogen Cunningham on the right there. So Nevertheless, She Persisted is a great example of an exhibition pulled from our strong permanent collection. Okay. And speaking of our permanent collection, here's like 2 glimpses of our collection storage, which is right around the corner from where my office is. As when Karen introduced us in the beginning, you might have noticed that my title is Associate Curator and Collections Manager. So along with my duties as curator, I also have to manage our collection. And our collection includes is over 5,000 objects that we own. And as you can see from these images, we have, of course, paintings, we have sculptures, we have works from all over the world, from very diverse backgrounds of cultures, including works from Africa, Asia, Oceania, and works from Latin America and pre-Columbian works. The majority of our works are works on paper, so prints, drawings, photographs. That consists the bulk of our collection, but we do, as you can see, have these wonderful examples of painting and sculpture. If you're ever on Hofstra's campus, you'll notice there's sculpture all around campus, and those outdoor sculptures also fall under our purview. So we are in charge of maintaining them and keeping them.
Great. Thank you. So these are some of the questions that were submitted to us beforehand. So I'm going to start and go a little bit, and Kristen, you can feel free to jump in when you.
Okay.
First question was about how do you develop exhibition themes that work for different audiences, talking about our university versus public schools and general public. I think I touched on this a little bit when I first started talking. We tend to do exhibitions that are developed around a specific theme or topic, like the idea of technology in the arts. So I think the exhibition itself is not the part that gets tweaked to a specific audience. I think it's our interpretation of that exhibition that changes for the audience. Whereas for a university class, we may be focusing on a certain aspect of the work, and it could be the artistic, aesthetics of the work. It could also be the mechanics of how things are done. So it depends on what the class is. We very specific to whatever the class that comes in. We work with the faculty member to really address what they need. Our public schools do come into the galleries and use some of the exhibitions for their programs. A lot of times the public schools are using artifacts from our collection. So they'll touch on the exhibition, but a lot of times they're also using specific works from our collection. We have one program that is our Art Travelers Through Time, which third grade students in the mainly Nassau and Suffolk County come in, and they, during third grade, the program, Liz could probably talk about this more specifically, but the program is geared towards the third grade New York State curriculum, where they study communities in the world. So we have artifacts, as Kristen mentioned, from Africa, from Asia, from Oceania, from Mexico. So we bring out these artifacts into the galleries, and the students look at those authentic objects. And they oftentimes will relate something in the program to the exhibit on view, but it's not always the exhibit on view. And with our public, it's also, for the general public, we do programming for each exhibition that's considered that's geared towards the general public. So something like this presentation is considered a public program. So we'll do exhibition receptions, we'll do conversations, we'll do sometimes artist panels or lectures. We do film screenings. We've had really good success with finding a related film that would fit with the theme. There's a lot of different ways. I don't think it's necessarily the exhibit theme that we need to worry so much about. It's how we interpret that theme for the different audience. And then, Christian, you want to do
Sure.
how you decide which pieces of art are included?
Sure. So the question is, how is it decided which pieces of art are included in a specific exhibition? That's a good question because it's hard. Sometimes it depends on, you always like to see a work of art in person before making a decision of whether or not it would be included in an exhibition. And if that work is in your collection, that's easier than going out and doing a studio visit or going to a gallery or to another institution. But sometimes if you're doing loan works, then that's going to be what you have to do, which is always a great experience to go and see work of art and a student in an artist studio. But essentially, it's sometimes you sort of want a diversity of either media or different types of artists, and sort of you have to kind of strike a balance. I think, yeah, sometimes it's different for every exhibition, right? So nevertheless, it was, not just finding works by women, but it was, finding works by women artists who kind of fit this idea of persistence, or this idea of overcoming odds, or, like I said, sort of working on, continuing to work as an artist, even without, recognition or acclaim. So that certain artists didn't really fit that mold, so I kind of, whittled them down from our own collection.
But I think that you're getting to the point of an exhibition has usually like a research paper has a thesis statement.
Correct.
An exhibition has a statement about what you're trying to do. So every work that you're choosing should support that statement.
Right.
So, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes there's other things that come up. You can want something, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get that particular work.
Right.
So sometimes you have to say, okay, well, if I'm not going to get that, is there another work that's acceptable that would do the same thing? Or am I just going to not include that artist because that's the work that I really wanted? And there have been instances where there were works that I felt if I didn't get them for the exhibit, I didn't know if I could do the exhibit. And a few years back, I did an exhibition from portraits to tweets, the U.S. presidency imagery and technology, talking about the image of the U.S. presidency. Well, and I didn't feel we could even do that show until I knew we had a Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington to start. Fortunately, we were able to do that. We borrowed it from the Everson Museum at Syracuse. So, but I said, we can't do this show and not have that image in it. It wouldn't make sense to the exhibit to not have that as the beginning. Because that's when you think of a U.S. president, how many people think of that painting of George Washington as the president? So sometimes there's a very specific work that you want to include. Sometimes it's a little bit different. For Uncharted, it was more about, I wanted a range of responses from artists. I wanted to show that the artist's individual interpretation and how they use technology is very individual and specific to them. It's not everything is the same. Another thing which it's not really kind of related here is the title of the exhibition is Uncharted, American Abstraction in the Information Age. We very specifically did not include computer age in the title because we didn't want the audience to think they were going to look at computer-generated images. So even the title sometimes really has to be carefully chosen. And then, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
I just see that Barbara had a follow-up question. That was her question.
Okay.
And that she was curious to know if works included always had to support the theme, or do they sometimes sometimes do you include works that question, I guess, the theme, right? Is that?
I don't know if I would call it questioning the theme. I would say we often say something, and part of this goes to the next question about what other factors you consider in hanging and arranging, is actual physical space. You sometimes don't have enough space in the gallery to do what you want to do. So you have to narrow it down. We always have more artwork than we could possibly show you. Yeah. There's always more that we're cutting out. It's always a problem of cutting down, not of adding into.
Yeah. And I always like to, when I'm curating an exhibition, I always, in the text, I always like to kind of point out certain limitations that we've had, or, like sort of, make clear that I understand you might look at for example, a year ago, I did an exhibition about mass incarceration, which was three photographers looking at aspects of incarceration. So I focused on 3 themes that are important to mass incarceration and included that it's a huge topic. I cannot present an exhibition in our gallery space and say that it was a complete exploration of the crisis of mass incarceration in America. So it's something like, so I don't say we use works to challenge, but I often like to show, I like to point out that, obviously this is just a glimpse, or this is just one portion of a theme or something.
Yes, and I think in our I think in what we often try to do in our introduction or in the catalog is to say, we know that we're giving you a limited view.
Yeah.
We often try to give you other resources to find out more, so that you could go forward on your own to realize there's more.
Right.
But it's a limitation of space, and it's a limitation of resources.
Right.
And one of the things is somebody had asked a question about hanging and arranging. It really depends upon the exhibit and how you want to do it. In Uncharted, each artist, some artists had one, some had three. We kept each artist's work kind of together. That sometimes it's done more thematically. I know in Nevertheless, Kristen had some kind of loose groupings she was going to make based on some of the struggles that the artists had. So it's really specific to the exhibit, how we arrange it. And of course, that also means what are we hanging also? Is it photographs? Is it a bunch of various media? And do we need pedestals? And is it lighting? And like in Uncharted, I had two artists come in to do site-specific installations. Well, I had to figure out where they came, kind of a matter of logistics. They had to come in early January in order to do their installations, because then we needed to photograph them to put them in the catalog. The show didn't actually open till the end of January. But, so I had to know at the beginning of January where I wanted them to do their site-specific installation. And that's where they were going to be. Everything else was going to have to work around that. And yes, we do a layout beforehand and figure out how things are going to fit and where they're going to go. It often changes when you get the actual work in the gallery.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variations. I mean, we plan as much as we possibly can to make it an easier, installation wise. But there are things that come up that you can't foresee, or things that happen. Let's see. The next question is requesting work from other institutions.
Oh, right.
So other institutions, meaning museums, can take longer, usually at least a year. If you're getting artwork from individual artists or commercial galleries, you don't really usually need as much time. Since we plan 2 or 3 years in advance, we always try to have these things pretty set within a couple years about exactly what we're going to be asking for. As Kristen mentioned, we like to see everything in person before we're going to put it in an exhibition. I have to say sometimes that doesn't happen. Usually it's with an artist whose work I already know, that I'm confident about what their art is, what their work is, or if it's something that's a multiple, a print that comes in multiple editions, and we just need one copy of it. It's not as important that we see that exact one. So with another institution, usually we've been in contact with them before we even ask, because we tell them we're working on the show. I saw this on your, I know this is in your collection. Can I come see it? Can I come meet with you? Is it available to loan? So there's a little bit of a contact about a year or more before. And then hopefully the formal letter of request to the other museum is about a year in advance. And because sometimes it depends on the institution, they usually have a committee that meets on loan approvals. So there's a process of not only you asking, but then they have to approve. And we do the same thing when people borrow from our collection. You have to submit a facilities report. You have to tell us exactly what the exhibit is, who else is in the exhibit. There's a lot of details like that. And then the other thing that can also get involved in asking with another institution is budget, because oftentimes you're paying a loan fee to borrow. If the work needs conservation, if it needs to be matted and framed, if it needs a crate, you as the borrower are responsible for all of those charges. So it can get, as you can imagine, it could get very expensive very fast. So that's always another consideration as to what, So, and it depends also on the other institution. Sometimes, if you have an existing relationship with another institution, there's a little bit more of a leeway where, if you borrow back and forth from your collections, you don't charge each other because it's kind of silly. So those kinds of questions.
We have 2 questions. Barbara had a question about what we acquire for the permanent collection, which I think we're going to get to.
We're going to get to that one, Barbara. Yeah.
But Kathy asked a good question. That are there some museums that do not lend art at all? And yes. certain museums, like if you're familiar with like the Barnes collection in Philadelphia or the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, they are museums that are private collections that have very strict guidelines on them, and they are to be hung, you know, something like, well, the Barnes is a bigger, we won't get into the whole issue of the Barnes, but the Barnes is supposed to be hung exactly the way that Dr. Barnes hung his collection in his house and is to never be removed. So those works cannot be lent out. And the same with the Isabella Stewart Gardner, to the point with, if you ever go to Boston, you go to the Gardner Museum, they had a famous art heist. So they had they had canvases stolen from them, and they have empty frames on their walls because they will not remove them.
And the other thing that I didn't mention was that there's also often conditions on the loan.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of museums have gotten stricter on their conditions, to the fact that we used to borrow from either, you know, like the Metropolitan or the Museum of Modern Art, but now a lot of their restrictions are they want to guard in the gallery 24/7. For us, that's not really feasible. I mean, yes, we have security and things like that, but when the building's locked and alarmed and closed, they wanted somebody in the galleries. So that negates us borrowing from them, because that's one of their conditions now. And Tasha said, do they request when they have special? Yes, the Barnes and Stewart Gardner, yes, they borrow from other places.
Yeah, it's kind of new for both of them. They weren't always like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it has to do, as Kristen said, with the way the founder originally funded the museum.
Yeah.
Was the idea that it was an individual.
Right.
Museum.
I'm unclear, like I'm not sure, but I wonder, it's possible also, like at the Metropolitan, like the Lehman collection can't be loaned out or something. I'm not sure.
I think a certain percent of it has to be on view at all times.
At all times.
I think that there is some restriction about, but they do changing exhibits in that space. So
that's true.
Yeah. So it's all right. So I'm going to move on to the next group of slides here. Okay. Okay, we kind of talked about.
Yeah, we sort of talked about the theme.
Talked about this a little bit. I think this was Jasmine's question. So yeah, the theme, you know, a lot of times, just to give you an idea of some of the themes that we've done recently, we did the, you know, art and technology, right? We did the women artists, both very topical at this time. Last fall, we did environmental impact, so climate crisis and change. Kristen had done the other people's parties, which was about photography and social media, and how we've all become voyeurs. Part of it anyway. Yeah. Participants and voyeurs at the same time. We did the hidden insight, photographing incarceration, which was we had a tremendous response on that from the Hofstra community and from the local community about that. And we did a number of programs that weren't really art related, that were more about the issue. So we collaborated with a number of places on campus and did a whole panel on the high school to prison pipeline issue, you know, how students are. So it was very, very interesting. So those are the types of things while maintaining that we are a fine art museum and the quality of the art is the most important to us. But the idea that there's more that we can add to the conversation and get people more interested in other topics is one of those things. Yeah. Let's see. And okay, so generally, if we're borrowing, we touched on some of this, but with that's a good question.
Good question, Barbara.
With contemporary artists or artists, especially if they're local, generally we'll do a studio visit to look at their work, especially if it's someone we don't necessarily know their work already. With Uncharted, almost everybody was kind of in the region anyway. So I did go and visit all the studios, which is really helpful because a couple of the installation pieces came from my studio visit. So they only, those works only exist because in this exhibition. They were based on some work they were doing in the studio, but they created them just for us. So that's one of those things that can happen when you're just talking with somebody in their studio, because one of the works, it was something that the artist was just trying out, and she hadn't intended to show it to me necessarily, but it was in her studio when I went to visit her. So I was like, oh, and it intrigued me. So we started talking about it more and more, and so that became the piece that we included in the exhibition from our conversation. So those kind of things, that kind of makes it very interesting. It's very unique to this exhibition then, that it's really created for us. Let's see. Kristen, you want to go on? You want to? I don't know if we want to answer Barbara's question first or last, because that's a very open-ended question.
No, it's a tough one.
That's a tough one. What defines fine art?
What defines fine art? So that could be a cold program of what exactly is fine art. Well, that maybe like leads into our how we acquire art, which goes to your earlier.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So how we acquire art and what we determine to include in our collection. We are, as the Hofstra University Museum of Art, we are an accredited institution. We're an accredited museum through the AAM, which is the American Alliance of Museums, which means that we adhere to a certain level of best practices for for running a museum, right? And part of that includes the acquisitions process, which is what you call the big fancy word for getting art in your collection. So a lot of museums do it in different ways, but for us, like Hofstra, our museum, we don't have an acquisitions budget. Some museums do. We do not. So we do not go out and purchase works of art. That's what that means. But we rely on donations of art, gifts of art from very generous people. So so the museum would be basically approached by a donor, or we have existing relationships with donors who offer us certain works for our collection. That requires us to, once something's presented to us, Karen and I have to do our due diligence, and we have to do research on the works, research on the artist. Oh, thank you, Nicole. Of what it would be, and of what how it fits into our collection, and if there's
a number of kind of preliminary issues that we talk about.
Right.
We have a collections management policy, which is a whole written description of all of this that we're talking about. We don't take things that need conservation work. We don't have that kind of budget to take something in and then keep fixing things. We just don't have that. Our budget doesn't allow that. We want to make sure of the provenance, meaning the history of the work, where it came from, who owned it, those kinds of issues. We generally don't have too much problem with that, because most of our work is more contemporary, but that's especially important in works that were made before World War II because of the Nazi theft of works, and works from other cultures that have not been in this country since before 1970, because that's part of the ICOM thing. So there's a little bit more technical, but so those are some of the things we look at. But we also look at, what's in our collection? Is this something that's going to make our collection stronger? Is it a gap that we're trying to fill? We do have some gaps that we're trying to fill, and we do that. So there's a variety of different considerations, and that's all kind of internal between Kristen and I generally, figuring that out first. But then there's also a formal acquisition process which is a committee that meets 4 times a year, that we present the artworks that are being offered to the committee. We like to have them, the real objects there for them to look at. We discuss whether we want to accept them, and then they vote on it. The university president approves our vote, basically, because technically they're owned by the university, not by the museum. But he always goes by what our recommendation is. He's never questioned that we're recommending the wrong thing. And then there's a process of accepting it and it being given legal, deed of gift to give it to us and things like that. So it's a long process to get it into the collection. And then Kristen actually keeps track of that collection.
And that's, yes. How do you keep track of the collection is primarily what my job is. So after you go through that whole process of when you go through the whole acquisitions process, once that work has been put into our collection, it receives a unique number. So every object in our collection, all 5,000 plus objects, have a unique number, and that unique number is called an accession number. And accession numbers, if you go to any museum, generally on their labels, you'll see at the end, you'll see like a year and then a dot and then numbers, and that's an accession number. So usually it's the year, and then, so let's say it would be 2020.5. That means that we received that gift in 2020 and it was the 5th gift of the year. That's generally how those accession numbers go. So every object has a number, and every place in our collection storage has a number. So we use a software called Past Perfect, and that is a database that we keep. And so everything should be in the right place. And so if you look up a certain accession number, it should tell you exactly what place it would be in. And we can keep all sorts of information also in there, I don't know what kind of information we keep in there, but
But it's things like, is it framed? Is it matted?
Matted.
What the condition is
it on loan?
The exhibition history. Did Karen say she's using it for an exhibit, so Kristen can't?
I can't. Right. Yes. Yes. Things
So
like
there's a lot of other information in there too.
Yeah. We also keep every object also has a physical manila folder file. So there's just a lot of filing, and physical and digital filing that basically make sure. But mostly it's that accession number that's really the key to that sort of keeping track of everything.
Yeah. So.
Oh, so Nicole has a question. Sorry, I missed that, Nicole. What makes you feel like you need to add something to the collection, and does the university put a limit on your collection?
Well, I think a lot of it is we're trying to continue. We want to, every collection, and especially because ours is donated, we have gaps. We have some really strong parts of our collection, and we have things that we feel like we're missing. We've been developing a really nice photography collection, but we still have some gaps. Yeah. So if somebody wants to give us an Ansel Adams photograph, we would love it, because we don't have one. But we do have a lot of other, we have Diane Arbus, and we have Bernice Abbott. We don't have Eugene Atget, though, so that would be nice.
It would be nice to have Abbott and Atget.
Yeah, because they go together. Yeah,
they go together.
So I think there's always things that places that we need.
Oh, great. We do have Joel Meyerowitz.
Yes, we do have Joel Meyerowitz. Yeah, we have a number of Joel Meyerowitz.
And Amy, I don't want a loan. I would like a gift. Thank you.
And no, the university has never put a restriction on what we're taking. We're pretty autonomous as far as what the collection is and what we accept. Sometimes things are given to the university but not given to the museum. So that's their distinction, because they're things that we do not they're not of the quality that we want for the museum. So there's sometimes the university will take something that we don't, we don't let's see. Well, this is someone who actually didn't log in. I don't know. They didn't. But anyway, one of the things that we've been trying to do is make our collection more accessible. And one of the things that Past Perfect does allow us to do is there's a component of an additional component of Past Perfect called Past Perfect Online, which allows us to basically push certain fields from the database to be accessible on our website so that people can actually see what we have. So this is something that we've been trying to, Kristen and our graduate assistants have really been working on getting the works on more accessible online.
Yeah.
And we have now about 1,500, I think, from the collection that are accessible on our Past Perfect Online. If you go to our website, you can see.
And those are going to be sort of our biggest hits, right? So like it's so do look at it, do search it, do see what we have, and if you are having trouble finding things, please like send feedback, because I need to know if the thing's not working.
All right. So okay, I'm going to go on to the next one here. All right. Okay. I almost was going to pull up the photo because somebody asked, this is a question that people have asked me often, and I do have one of my absolute favorites is our Joan Mitchell Metro painting, which she's an American abstract expressionist painter. It's an absolutely beautiful gem of a painting. It's about 16 by 17 inches big. It's not huge, but it is like the most perfect painting. And I've always said, if it's gone missing, you know who has it.
Yeah.
It is by far my favorite. Although I also love our Thai Buddha head. Is also one of the stone Thai Buddha head is also one of my favorites.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I saw this question and I laughed because Karen and I have the same favorite. We both love the Joan Mitchell. But I will say maybe my second favorite work in the collection, and this is a shout out to my education colleagues, is Marishi Tan. And he is a wonderful Japanese sculptor, about yay big, and he is a warrior who sits on a boar, and I think I believe he like brings the sun in the morning. That was the myth.
Yes, he brings bringer of the sun. Yep.
Yeah, and we bring him up. He's very popular in the Art Travelers program that Karen mentioned earlier, I always just love being it. He's just a great character, and the the children always seem to really connect with him, and every grad assistant I've had always freaks out about Marishi Tan too. I don't know what, there's just something about him that is very he just seems like a really cool guy that you could kick back with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the next one is the challenges of acquisition. And yes, there are times we do not take things. Mm-hmm. There have been times where sometimes a donor wants you to take a group of works, and you can't just take what you want. Sometimes that's fine, but sometimes if the ones you want, if there's 20 works and you only really want 2 of them, we're not taking 18 we really don't want. So there are times where we do not take things. Sometimes one of the things. Sometimes a donor has a condition that they want it to be on view all the time, or a certain amount of time. Well, we do changing exhibitions. We don't have anything permanently on view, so we don't take something like that because that's So that's one of the other kind of considerations, is what kind of conditions a donor would make on. And let's see, Jimmy's still here? Yeah. Jimmy had given us a number of Robert Kipnis works, which is very much a gap that we had in our collection, our print collection. We didn't know he had given us those. So, and the oldest work, well, it's not one work. It's works from what's considered, saying the un-PC, pre-Columbian era,
Right.
1500 BCE, usually from the areas of Mexico and Central America. We have a number of basically mostly clay works from that era, and those are the oldest pieces in the collection. But we have some, older Asian pieces too that date back to the 12th, to 15th, 16th centuries.
Mm-hmm.
We have, let's see, what else do we have?
The fibulae.
Oh yes, we have the Bronze Age, the Roman metalwork fibulae, which are like the brooches and clasps that were. But the works from pre-Columbia, from basically ancient Mexico and Central America, are the oldest ones for sure. So, and then we have things that were made this year. So.
That's right. Yeah.
We have things from all the way from those, which is what's a little bit unique about the university collection, is that we do have a real range. And I always talk, when we talk to faculty, we always say, you have a class, we could probably find an artwork for you.
Right, yeah.
So we could find something that you could use. So I think that's, and we generally have. Does anybody have any other questions that didn't come up? But we didn't really answer the what is art. Do we ever approach organizations or private collectors for acquisition? You betcha. Oftentimes, if depending on who you meet, what you know, things happen. A number of the works in the collection are artists who are in who are in an exhibition at the museum, and after the exhibition is over, we'll say, "Would you like to give that to us?" That's been something that's been done very frequently. We have most of our collectors that get donors that give to us are long-standing relationships. They're people that we've been dealing with for sometimes like 10. I think the Imperados have been like 10 or 12 years, giving us works from Africa. The Susan and Stephen Ball, he was an alumni from Hofstra. For almost 30 years, they gave us photographs every year. So there's some, long-standing donors. But we're always open, to find something else. Sometimes it's just very serendipitous. Somebody just reaches out, and one of our more recent donors was somebody who just kind of cold called us and said, "Would you guys be interested?" Mm-hmm. And we always follow up, because you never know, and this one happens to be a really good one. So he's already given us a dozen works for our collection that fills a gap of, 1980s Lower East Side New York that we didn't really have. So and that was just kind of a happenstance, So it comes a different way. Let's see.
Lisa wants to know if we have medicinal pieces like mortars or grinders. I don't.
Only if we have something that would be. I don't think. I'm trying to think. It would be in one of the. It would be either probably an African or a pre-Columbian work if we did. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah.
That would be considered a tool like that.
I know we do have, Sasha posted it for thanking our medical workers recently, was a Buddha holding sort of a medicinal properties, but I don't remember having one on its own.
A virtual tour of the collection storage room. Well, right now we're not allowed to be there, so it's not going to happen now. We have a few photos that we had taken previously, and those are the ones that we shared. We do actual tours of the collection storage room with some of the Hofstra students when we've done that with the honors college classes a couple times. The museum studies classes, we've done it. Problem is of space for doing it in person. It has to be a very limited group. We did it as a special members tour. With something I think that this being virtual is going to change some of the things that we do.
Right, yeah.
I think
that we're also good at Zoom, maybe we can
I think, Jimmy, you're right. I think it's a great idea to do it after we get back in.
Yeah.
So I think there will be more virtual experiences that we will definitely continue to do after we even go back. I think it was something we kind of never really explored. We always were about doing everything in person. But
Yeah.
it does open it up for more people to participate. So I don't know. So I don't know if anybody else has any other questions that they'd like. If you want to unmic yourself and ask, you certainly can. Like we're down to 13 people, so on specific we don't have on specific pieces. Basically, Barbara, on our virtual program is pretty new. So we're trying to do one a week. So this is our second one. We did a slow art day on Saturday. We do this one next Thursday, and I'll lean forward it. There we go. At 4:30,
Cool.
we're going to do a special on the Nevertheless She Persisted exhibition. So it'll be specifically about that exhibit and the works in that exhibit. So that one, that's all of our upcoming events are going to be on our website, on our calendar page. So this is the next one that we've confirmed. We are also planning on a what was it? Abstract, was it roll and draw, which is an art project that the education department is going to be doing, which will be the 23rd, I think. And then on the 30th, we had been planning to show a documentary about called Women Art Revolution, which is a documentary about women artists and their struggles and overcoming those struggles.
And I was just curious because I've been attending lectures at the Morgan virtually.
Oh, okay.
I know it's not going to be in depth like that collection, but I was just curious if you had anything, say, on a specific artist or style or whatever.
No, we don't have anything that's like prepared because it's not. Most of our public program was always geared towards our exhibitions, so it was always more temporary.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think part of what this is teaching us is that, or telling us, is that we can do more things that are then available for people to just watch as a recording.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it's just not something that we're a small staff. We're trying to do a lot of things. We have a lot of different audiences that we're attending to. So I think that there's a lot of things in the future that are going to be done a little bit differently. And I think the idea of doing more virtual or some kind of virtual component, or even when we do a programming, to film it and then put it up for people to view afterwards would be.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Great. Wait, I feel like I lost a question. There was a question that I lost. Oh.
There was a nice thank you from Jimmy.
Oh, yes. Jackie asked, with the broad range of possible art, how do you decide what is a gap in the collection? It's a good question too.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's just certain things. I mean, if you know the history of art, and there's just sort of like,
No.
just think of a movement, that you might like, or maybe surrealism, right? And we actually do have some really wonderful works of surrealism, so we're good on that. But you might notice that that's something that could be strengthened or something. Also things like, I know Karen and I talk about this a lot. For us, it's a lot about diversifying our collection. So looking for artists of color, women artists, things like that. Sort of finding those sort of missing pieces that could strengthen our collection in a lot of different ways.
Kristen, didn't you even go as far in the other people's parties exhibit to say that in one of your captions, that it was obvious to you that there were some works and some people not represented?
Yeah. So the exhibition that sort of like in Ransom, caught in the Axon Library, that continues to be up for nobody to view right now. other people's parties, was an exhibition that I curated that was a photography exhibition pulled completely from our collection, and focused on images of social interactions, which is sort of interesting to think about now when we can't have social interactions. Bye, Barbara. And yeah, I like to point in the text. I did point out that in that collection, it's a wonderful. It was a great. We have a great collection of photography, and it's really strong. But when you look at that exhibition, that I was only able to include one work by a woman artist, and I don't believe any artists of color. And that was sort of, it's no one's party. But I just like to point those out in case people feel like they would like to, just, on the off chance that someone might have some art by a woman artist that they might want to give to us, or, but just sort of, yeah.
And you'll take as little as one piece of artwork, or do you need a collection from a donor?
Oh, we'll if you are offering one work or 100 works, we will consider anything. Yeah.
Not that I am, but you never know.
Or,
I do have a lot of artwork in the attic, which is upsetting.
Did we lose Karen?
Yeah, you're the host now.
Okay. Uh-oh. Does anybody else have any other questions, or we're all good?
This was great. So
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Oh, here comes Karen. Karen's back. Okay.
Yes.
Where is she? There she is.
We lost you for
muted.
a minute.
You're muted.
Huh?
What?
Can anyone lip read?
No.
She's
There she goes.
there we go.
And she's back.
I'm just like
Still
Karen.
muted. Yeah, she's still muted. Karen, unmute.
Sorry, I lost my computer went completely blank. Totally disconnected from the internet, and I was like, and then I wasn't sure if I could, if you guys were, if I went out, if I would be able to get back at all. Anyway, so I missed the last part of what you were saying, Kristen.
Me too.
Yeah, it happened at the perfect time.
Okay.
But I think that's, unless anybody has any other questions. If you do, you can email myself or Karen, or thanks everybody for coming, and we hope to see you next week for our opening virtual reception. And
Yeah, and we're going to talk specifically about Nevertheless, She Persisted. So if you want to know more about that exhibit and those artists and what's included in there, would be good. And then we'll keep posting all of our new events on our website, on our calendar page, and we'll try to also get them out there in some of our email blasts too on our social media, so that people can see what else is happening. We're gonna try to keep doing them on Thursday. That seems to work for us, and that people get used to looking for us on Thursday. We thought might be a good thing to do. So that's good. No more. So I thank you all.